Okay, so this evening we are going to run through P6-Calculator. So it's evening for me. I'm Nicole Jordan. I'm joining you actually today from Montreal. And with me will be Dan McMillan. He's our lead programmer and the brains behind many of our P6-Calculator items. And I think we've got Donna Hireta on the phone, on the line with us as well. She's in the Philippines. So let's chat about why we made P6-Calculator. So this is a tool that we've been working with and selling for a number of years, well over 10. And we started to really use it for clients that needed things that P6 wasn't doing. Okay, so it could have been some of our drilling clients where we needed to make certain calculations. One of our very early clients was a railroad company who needed calendars created for every one of their activities because they needed to make sure the rail was clear, and the rail was an intersection of when the crew was there and when trains were not there. So that was a very special thing. So we made utilities for those sorts of things, and it just grew from there. Today, we're going to focus on costing. So we're going to look at the common struggles related to costing. That's the specifics of this webinar. We have other webinars too on Calculator that you can join if there's other types of things you want calculated that P6 doesn't do. Okay, so we've got lots of different scenarios. Now, years ago, Oracle did an analysis of who was using what side of P6. So everyone uses it for scheduling. Everyone uses it to calculate dates. Most people use it for resources. So I think the poll was about 70 to 80% of clients used resources as well. But costs was lower. Now I don't quite know what the statistics would be today, but I suspect they'd be similar. Cost was only 30 to 40% of users were using costs. Now, some of the struggles I'm going to touch on as to why that might be. Some of the weaknesses within the software that would make it hard to do that consistently, to get the right calculations in the system, to make it easy to administer. Okay, those would be some of the challenges to using costs in P6 right now. So what we tried to do with Calculator, because quite a few of our clients are integrated, so they integrate to other systems. So maybe an ERP system like an SAP or an Oracle Fusion, or asset management type tools like a Maximo, JD Edwards, others just slipping my mind, but we have lots of clients that want a fully integrated system. That way they avoid a lot of data entry and they get the data that they want in a central hub, which allows them to report out properly and consistently into other tools like a Power BI. And I'll show you some of that. So these are some of the reasons that they struggle with the costing, and P6-Calculator can help you get over that, so that the project development is quicker, and it includes all aspects, and you're able to get that data into a central place, which means that you can push it out and share it accurately and quickly if you're getting your updates in quickly. Okay, so that's something that I'm going to touch on as we run through this calculator, different aspects to it, and we'll touch on whether or not you can see some value in the way that you can use the system. So I'm going to ask a quick poll question, and if you want to answer it, you can. Are you integrated? Do you have your P6 working with other systems? And I'm going to ask both questions actually in one back-to-back. And the reason I'm asking this is costing, of course, has outside influences, and meaning things like invoices, things like actuals. Actuals are a big thing. Getting those into P6 is hugely important. And depending on your role, if you're a contractor, if you're an owner, it will vary what you want to do inside P6 and how you would do it. And let's ask the poll question essentially that Oracle was asking. Do you use just scheduling? Do you schedule and resource, and or have you had a chance to go into using costs? So it's going to vary, and of course it depends on your particulars. Okay, so I'll touch on how some of these things can be extended using P6-Calculator. Now updating, let's touch on updating. So typically you start your project off with an estimate. The estimate is done by the estimating team, and it will usually be at some sort of level of detail. It may not be totally granular, totally down into the absolute bare bones detail. It may be more of a roll-up type estimate, particularly if you're a contractor. You're not going to necessarily say exactly who's going to do the work. You may not say whether it's going to be subcontracted out or stay internal. You don't necessarily do all that when you're doing the original estimate, particularly if you don't have a lot of time. So that's the starting. Then we get into updating, and updating can be quite frantic depending on your project. So streamlining updating and having things help you do updating is a big piece of what you can do with P6-Calculator, and I'm going to show you some examples. And then, of course, I mentioned getting that data out to the extended teams. That's where maybe some snapshotting, and I'm going to use one of our tools, our P6 Reporter tool. I'll show you snapshots and how you can snapshot data into your reporting engine. And I'll use Power BI as the example in this webinar. Now, with all those facets, so you're doing scheduling, you've got resources, you start to do costing, there can be quite a bit of benefits because you can do earned value analysis. And as soon as you're starting to do earned value, you're starting to look at what is truly trending on your project. Now that's the key thing. And this is a big thing that's not always easy. So even though we put a schedule together, even though we did all the logic and we did all the calendars, are we truly understanding what's going on the project? And can we stay in front of the problems? That's really what we're trying to do. Now, how does P6-Calculator work? Well, let's touch on that. So P6-Calculator allows us to create calculations. Those calculations are happening right inside P6. So as a user, you don't see another interface with P6-Calculator all over it. It's embedded right inside P6. That means you can use it on any project you need to in your database. We have the ability to do roll downs and roll ups. Roll downs are usually from the project down onto WBSs, activities, resources, expenses, steps. And roll-ups are usually the opposite. Okay, so usually from steps, expenses, resources, to activities, to WBSs, to projects. So it's the opposite. And if you've ever done user-defined fields, you know that they don't auto roll up or down. So Calculator has that inside of it, and I will show you some of that in this webinar. It's automated, or it can be manually invoked. Okay, so we can run calculator functions either of the two ways. And some things make sense to automate, and some things make sense to let the user say, I'm ready to run it. Okay, and I'm going to show you the ready to run it strategy in this webinar. So I'm going to jump in. I'm going to show the tool in action using what I think is a reasonable example from beginning, and we'll touch on some examples of what we've done for some clients as we go. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. Let me make sure I choose the right one. And let's see how this looks. Dan, let me know if it's coming through okay. We played with the colors a little bit. Hopefully you can see this, and hopefully it's clear. If it's not, I can bump my resolution up as well. Okay, so I'm going to use 3 projects in this webinar today. So I'm going to use the first one where I'm going to upload an estimate that I get from the estimating team. And in this case, it's going to be Excel, okay? But it could be integrated with your estimating tool if that makes sense. Or you can export to Excel. We could morph it into a P6 loader file, which is another one of our tools, and load it up, okay? So this project right now is empty. So it's just got a project framework, and then it's empty, and I will go ahead and open up my starting layout. So I'll start with a simple layout ready to receive data from my estimating team.
Hey, Nicole?
Yeah.
It is a bit hard to see actually because the text color is white on the pink, and it's, I mean, I can see it if I use my large monitor, but some of the people might be having some trouble seeing it.
Okay, let me bump the resolution. I probably should have chosen a better color, but let me bump the resolution up and see if that helps. Let me bump it. Sorry, chose the wrong one. Just see if that helps. It's in P6 that it's a little bit harder to see. Oops, sorry. Does that help? Or is it fuzzy?
It's clear, it's just the contrast is kind of hard because it's white and pink.
Okay. Okay, sorry, let me just see if I can find that thing real quick and change it. See, I could see it perfectly fine, so I thought it'd be all right. Where the heck did I put that thing? Sorry, guys, let me, okay, this little utility that Dan gave me so I could make the colors. Okay, so I think the pink is okay. It's the the text, right, that you said was no good?
Yes.
Highlight text?
Yeah, probably it's highlight text.
Okay. Let's see if that helps. Think I'm gonna have to log out or?
I don't think so.
Okay. Sorry guys, let's just get this fixed up. Is that better?
Yes, that's much better.
Okay. Okay, let me bump my resolution back down because I do have a lot of columns and I think it's gonna make it a little less annoying for scrolling. How's that? Is it still legible?
That looks perfect to me.
Okay, let's give it a shot and hopefully at least it comes through in the recording. Okay, all right, so let's touch on the sort of thing that your estimating team would give you, okay? So they would give you a list of activities. Now, in my example here, I'm going to do it very, very bare bones, just 2 activities. Okay? They're going to give you the activities and the WBS that they belong in. Now, then they're going to give you expenses possibly and resources. So again, I've got just 2 activities and they're telling me the resources and they're telling me how much work each one of those resources is going to do, or how much work a material resource is going to be. So how much quantity is what that would be. Now, in this case, they're telling us that we need a backhoe, it looks like, and labor. I don't know what these 2 are. Crew, backhoe, and foreman, it looks like. Okay, so they're giving us that. Now, that's good because, of course, the effort is going to dictate duration. It's going to dictate the cost. Now, what about the cost? Now let me go back to P6 and let's touch on that. So if you've used P6 and you've tried to do costing, you are probably familiar with this. If you're newer to P6, this might be something you haven't had a chance to explore yet. So P6 has the ability for us to create a list of resources. And as much as possible, you're trying to make a nice, consistent, reusable resource master dictionary. That's what you're trying to do, because this is going to give me a chance to compare my resource team on one project to another. And we want to see that, because we want to see, so let's just say I've got my civil engineering lead, or project controls, or a crew, a foreman, material is a big one. We want to see whether our productivity on one project versus another is better or worse. That's going to be a clue that we're having problems on a project or not. Okay, so trying to get a consistent resource dictionary is really important. And if you don't have that, it's something you should explore fixing in your P6. It'll bring a lot of value in reporting, in monitoring, in measuring. Now, with that in mind, I only have 5 different rates that I can use. Now, if all my projects are always in the same city, always in the same country, always in the same province, maybe that can work. But that's not typically the case. Most engineers, most owners, most contractors, they're working in multiple regions of the world, okay? Could be different countries, could be different provinces. These things have an influence. And what we find is often this is the reason that people don't do costing, is because they can't get their rates in the system. That's one thing that's a challenge. So another thing that can be a challenge is maybe my company is a Canadian-based company, but we're doing projects in the US. So I need to have multi-currency capability. This is another thing that's not very easy in P6, because the multi-currency really is one exchange rate for one currency, for two currencies together. So in this case, Canadian and American dollars. Now that doesn't make sense, doesn't work, because as we've been seeing in the last year or so, the currency exchange rates are fluctuating like crazy all over the place. So that would not work. So you need more flexibility. And this is one of the things that we've introduced with our P6-Calculator tool. We've introduced the ability to add in more fields that we can calculate off of to do these sorts of calculations. So one of the things that we did for the rates, we've got the ability to add a rate for each project. That's what we've got here. So these are different project numbers. This 23022, 23011, and 23033. These are different projects. Now, not only did we split the ability to do multiple rates, so more than 5, we also split the ability to do the cost. So what is the project going to cost us versus what are we selling it to, let's say the client, the owner in this case. Now in this example, I'm going to use a margin factor and a tax factor, but you can see here it could be an overhead, it could be a profit. So I'm just using 2 additional components that add on top of the cost to come up with the sell rate, so the rate that we're charging the client in this example. Okay, so the idea here is to give you some food for thought on what maybe you haven't been able to do in P6, and see whether some of these ideas could benefit your team. Now, since each project may have different rates, this is the information that I need from my estimating team to be able to start to use the framework of P6-Calculator to come up with the costs on my project, the cell on my project, and to start to do the multi-currency. Okay. So in this case, I basically need these three pieces of data from the estimating team. I don't need anything else. These are just there to show you the way that this data could be pushed in and out with P6 Loader. And as soon as P6 Loader sees a blank column, it stops trying to read the rest of the spreadsheet. So it's really, really handy to be able to load parts of data and then load more. Now, in this example, I'm also going to load just a handful of my resources. Okay, so my crew is going to be just these random numbers, as you can see, 333, that I put in. This is what P6-Calculator is going to use to calculate the costs for the different activities. Okay, so once I have this, so this is very simple, repeatable spreadsheet that you could have with your estimating team, or as I said, you could have a direct link to your estimating system. Many different ways to get the data in, but in this example, I'm going to use the P6 Loader to load it up. So this is another one of our tools. I've logged in. It's secure. It's a secure tool, and I can do an upload of this file. Now, I can also extract data. So I have the ability in P6 Loader to push data out and push it into P6. So this has been loaded up, which is great. Now let's go actually look at it in P6. So the data is loaded up. I can't see it quite yet. I just have to refresh this, and it's going to give me those two activities. Okay. So those activities have loaded in, and so have the resources. Now I need to recalculate and ask it to use all those values that I got in to my dictionary. Okay, so these are not empty anymore. They've loaded in. Those rates are in. So I just need to get P6-Calculator to recalculate everything. Now we've chosen to not let it calculate until we tell it to. So telling it to run is to set it to go, is what we're going to do. Now, by setting it to go, we're telling it to go ahead, make the calculation. So I'm going to save that in, and it will go as quick as it can. We've got a lot of utilities in this database, so it might take a minute. Now, it's going to start calculating the rates, the quantities. So if I have 10 hours at 333, it's going to be what 3330 is going to be the cost for that activity. Now, I might also need to do some exchange rate. So in this case, I can see that my currency for my company, my ledger currency, is Canadian, because we're a Canadian company. But my project currency, the one that I'm communicating with the client in, is US dollars. So I may actually want to put in exchange rate information. I may have a foundational overhead and profit that I'm going to use in my calculations. That's what I've got here in this example. Okay, so I can also put those in and run the P6-Calculator on it. Okay, now I just did the first pass. I got it to just do the basic calculations. Now in doing that, it's coming up with the dollar values, and it's showing them to me in these user-defined fields. So I'm seeing the US rates in here. Now, if I have an exchange rate today, I don't know what it is today, we could check it out. Looks like 1.32 Canadian. So I can put in the exchange rate for today. Maybe my foundational overhead and profit for this project is 15 and 10. Now with those, since I've made a change, I just need to ask it to rerun. So I can go ahead and do this as many times as I need to. Okay, so I can do some scenarios, and I just hit go, I save it, and then I can refresh it. Now, when I refresh it and it's completed, we should see some values in these fields here, like the project below, okay, where I've actually got the exchange rates into the system. So I'll just keep refreshing it, just take a minute, and then we should see it come through and make the calculations. Now, this is at the project level. So this is what I was calling the roll up. So it's coming from the lower level of P6 and giving me the final totals for the project up here. Now, while we're waiting for it to run, I can show you where all that heavy lifting is taking place, okay? So the lowest level of costing in P6 is in the expenses and in the resources. Now I've got the basic fields here, the P6 out of the box fields, and I've got extra fields that we've used in using P6-Calculator to do all sorts of other calculations. So we have the totals coming in here, and they're coming from the rates that are coming from the dictionary. So on crew one, where are you? Here we are, crew one. We have this rate, this 333. So we're overriding the fields that you would normally use out of the box. We're using these instead. So P6-Calculator is taking over, and we're using the rates that we've just put in with that master sheet from our estimating team. Now we're using the overhead and profit values. Those are being calculated, and you can see that the rate is, the cost rate and the sell rate have a variance here, okay? So we're going to be able to calculate both. What are we charging the client, and what is our cost rate? So we've got both available. Now we're going to be able to see that in both currencies. Okay, so this finished running. So it should be doing my US dollar as well as Canadian dollar. Okay, so you can see it here. So this is the total. So in Canadian dollars, this project is 210,000, but the sell that we agreed with the client is 159,814. Now our cost, so if we strip out the overhead and profit, is 159,281. Okay, so it's a small dollar amount in this example. Okay, and we've got the same overhead and profit being calculated in Canadian. So the computer's doing all that heavy lifting for us using either the top level rates, or we can also get into more specifics if we need to. Okay, so if I need to, I can have different rates down at the resource, depending on how your team works. Okay, so you may have different tax rates, you may have different overheads of profits for engineering versus site work. We've given you a lot of flexibility to do what you need to get the system to be very flexible. Okay, so lots of different ways you can tackle it. And those values, those source values, are all being used down at the detail level. So in this example, resources is a primary one that we're looking at. So the overhead and profits are calculated both on the project currency as well as on the ledger currency. So we can report on all the different details as we need to. Now, not only do we have that, but there may be a reason where this 333 rate is not what you want to use, okay? It could be a change in scope, and in that change in scope, you want it to be a higher rate, okay? You may want it to be a lower rate. Doesn't matter. The point is you have an override here that is specific to this particular resource on this particular activity. Now, same as what we did before, we just go ahead and ask it to go ahead and rerun. Okay, so you can do this as many times as you wish, which makes it very flexible and of course makes it very usable when you're in the middle of updating and your project's progressing and you need to be able to diverge from this. Now in this example I put it higher, but of course you could also put it lower, in which case it would calculate, it's going to recalculate the overhead and profit and the cost rate specifically based on this 400. Okay, so we'll see how it's making out. Okay, so it did the recalculation. Okay, so this cell now is has changed. The overhead and profit has changed. The cost rate has changed. So it's done all those calculations for me, and all I had to do is put in one value. Okay, so this is where the power of being able to use calculator really comes in. It lets this be very, very flexible. Now, you can probably see this little brackets with a caret symbol in it. So that's our symbol that we use in this demo database to show that we're doing a roll up on this field. So this field is automatically being totaled and then rolled up to the activity. And then the activities are totaling up and being rolled up to the project. So that's how that's taking place. So this value is coming from all those roll-ups. Now, again, we're tracking the cells, so what we've agreed with the client, and we're tracking what our costs are going to be. Okay. And of course, you want this number to be less than this, and that's going to depend on when you start doing your actuals. So your updating is going to start to come into play as well. So this is still just the estimate and the cell side that we've looked at. So that was resources. Now you do the same, more or less the same thing on expenses. Now expenses can be very handy because not everything always fits into a resource. Resources are great if you want to do histograms, you want to track your limits of maybe the number of folks that you have on a crew. Those work great. But we have on our projects all sorts of things that maybe are just one-off expense. It's just a cost or something that doesn't really fluctuate and you don't need to track a limit. Like maybe your site trailer could be a good example, or internet or computers, those sorts of things that don't necessarily need to be tracked as a resource. So you can do the same sort of tracking here in the expenses. Now, some of you might have said, well, something doesn't make sense in her numbers. Maybe these numbers don't make sense. That's because these two values are also totaling up and coming into this 107,750. Okay, so the resources, so these totaled up, and those numbers maybe aren't that easy for you to calculate, but we're missing some money because those dollars are sitting in the cell. And those are totaled up to combine up to this activity and then roll up to the WBS and then up to the project. So if there was ever something that you were struggling with getting it to calculate and do a roll up, this is part of P6-Calculator and it will do it automatically. All I need to do is follow the convention of what I've got here, and I can add another field to the system that will roll up automatically. So the same thing is happening for my overhead and profits, okay, that are both on the expense and the resource. Those are being totaled and again going up to the project level. And they're happening automatically on the US dollar as well as the Canadian currency. all that's happening on its own. I didn't do anything except, as you saw, just put in just a basic override in this example to have that take place. Now, this is a simple example, just one currency. You may have a situation where you're purchasing all over the world. So you have multiple currencies taking place on your project. Okay, so let's go look at an example like that. And I'll just switch to different layout, and we'll touch on the sorts of ways you can set that up. So in this project example, it looks like I'm going to have US dollars, I'm going to have euros, I'm going to have GBP, Great Britain pounds, Chinese, and Japanese yuan. Okay, so we've got lots of different exchange rates. These can all be put in independent of one another. And within the system, on the activities, the resources and expenses, we can have these being used and calculated within the project. So this is the setup. Now, let's go back for a moment. So we also have clients that want things to happen automatically in the resources or in the expenses, depending on different scenarios. So in this example, we also have other things that we want to track. So in this example, we have brokerage and handling. It looks like we've got a few different types of freight, brokerage and handling, and different percentages of costs. So you might have this scenario where you have standard ways that you want things calculated. So we had another client who wanted a crew total hours to be split to these specific resources automatically. Okay, so let's say you know that your crew complement is 3 carpenters, 1 helper or laborer, and 1 foreman, let's just say. So they want that automatically split, so that if I put 40 hours, it automatically split it with those ratios. Okay, that's another thing that we've done with the calculator. So when you have certain things that you know always have rules that they follow, so in this case, percent split, we can put that kind of thing in calculator. So it saves your team from having to do all that work. Now on the resources, that's important for the limits, because a carpenter doesn't do the same work as a laborer, doesn't do the same work as a foreman. So it's important to get the right ratio split for those sorts of detailed resource analysis. For costs, it's important for me to be able to see those costs. And I'm going to flip to a different layout that's got the multi-currency so you can see it better. So for the costs, it's going to be important to be able to see the way those costs are unfolding. Okay. So let me try and explain what you're looking at. So you're looking at an estimate that we have US purchases, we've got Canadian purchases, and we've got different cost accounts. Okay. So the different cost accounts can be different types of purchases. It could be a different size of purchases. So it really depends on your specifics. Let me just see if I can find this one so you can see some examples. So this looks like we've got direct expenses in this one. Looks like the 45 is small materials, large materials. So basically these are different ways that you can split your cost coding. And every client that we work with has a different strategy on that. So it looks like the estimate had certain items that we were going to go procure. And those items needed different handling, exchange, freight, brokerage, all taking place automatically. So essentially, these line items we got from our estimate, and these line items P6-Calculator automatically figured out, filled in, and our scheduling team did not have to do all these calculations in Excel or other systems. So that can be a huge time saver. Now let me try and show that to you on a more simple example. So I'm just putting one currency. So I'm just buying one type of equipment, and I've got one currency. So I'm going to run the calculator so you can see it go ahead and actually figure all that out for me. Okay, so I'm going to set it to go just like I did before. I'm going to save it. I'm going to refresh, and then I'm going to jump back to my activities. Okay, so it's just going to take a minute. I'll just keep refreshing. And what you should see is a bunch of lines come through on this, helping me with figuring out my true costs of purchasing this equipment from the European country in the European Union. Okay, so just take a minute. Now, you can see I've got another example here with Japanese yen, and the example I just showed you is the more complicated one because I had Canadian purchases as well as US dollar purchases. Okay, what's it doing? Why is it taking so long? I think I did it right, Dan? It just could be timing.
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
It's just on a fixed cycle. You just happen to do it right when you finish the last one. It's running now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, never fails. Here we go. Awesome. Okay, so what it did was it figured out the brokerage, freight, exchange, and handling all off of this dollar amount. Now the exchange rate is what is the difference between buying this in Canadian. And so we've got the exchange rate, and you can see that it's putting it in its own column, so we know exactly what is contributing to exchange rate costs. Now that's hugely important because if you are doing a lot of projects around the world, you want to be able to go out and procure different exchange rate currencies, try and get the best exchange rate you can, and you want to be able to do that in bundles. Okay, so this helps forecast what kind of currencies you're going to need, how much, and when, because we've got the timing of these projects on the activities. So that's a big one. And then we're also calculating the additional components that we're going to have to spend to get this equipment into Canada and get it to the project. So that's another huge piece. And this is all done automatically. Okay, so if we have to sit there calculating those different rates, the 11%, 3%, etc., it'd take a lot of time, even if you had it in Excel. Okay, now this does it automatically, and as I mentioned, the key thing here is it's going to know the dates that these hook onto. And if these dates move around, the requirement for the European euros going to change, okay, when you need them and how much. So that's a big, big factor here. Now, on this project, we also have labor, okay? So we've got, let me go to a better activity. So we also have labor that's been estimated from the estimating team. So when we're putting the project bid together, we're gonna get some estimates. Now, this is pretty common, the way that the estimate would be put together. So we're saying that we have 150 hours for this materials controller, ops manager, project manager. So we've got buckets of time, and we've got rates that we have internally for the labor. Now, that's all basic, standard, straightforward stuff. P6 will make your calculations for you. Perfect. Now, where this can get more complicated is, of course, as we discussed in the currencies. But it can also get more complicated on the updating. Okay, so let's look at this example. So this is the same activity, but it's been updated. So this activity actually started to receive, in this example, timesheets. So you may have your team actually putting in timesheets in a different system, and we could read that data in. So in this example, it was in an integrated environment, but it could come through Excel. It doesn't have to be an integrated environment. So now, how the heck do we do our updating, and how do we look at our earned value when we are not putting all the update hours to the original estimate? Okay, so these were the 3 that we had originally, but now we have all these other folks that charge to the project, and maybe that's legit, and maybe they made a mistake on their timesheet. Okay, so those are other things that having this detail can help you with. But you can see that they've charged hours, so these are actual hours that have come through the system. Now, this happens for all of our clients. So what we've done with P6-Calculator is we've done a way of merging the actuals that come in, but getting actuals to update on the original estimate. Okay, so let me try and show you that a bit better. So I've sorted this by role. So this is the original 150 hours. But you can see here we have, what is this, 60, we've got 90 hours that came in. And I need a way to see that on this original estimate line, okay? Now, what we've done here in this example is we've given the ability for the project manager to update the at completion, okay, or the to complete, the remaining. So we can do one or the other. You can mix and match. And we want that to calculate, understanding that we have burnt up some actuals here. We don't want to double dip. We don't want to type 90 in here because this would be a double dip. Okay, but we do want it to understand that 90. So this is where we've got a lot of nice smarts here in the way that P6 works. Now you can see that the PM typed in the 170. So that's their forecast of where we're going to be at the end of this activity. And we've calculated the variance on that. Okay, so we had a 150 as our original. We've typed in the 170 and we've calculated the variance. Now, our estimate at completion on the cost is also something that we might get through our accounting system, through our timesheet system, okay? So you can see here that we might have the rate on some of these folks, but we don't have the rate on every single one of these people, okay? Now, that could just be something that we do on integration, but regardless of that, we need a way to do the calculation, or we need a way to receive the actual. So we could also forecast the remaining cost on this as well, okay? So we can do both and have them work independent. So P6 does allow that, and as does our P6-Calculator. So we can have the labor hours as well as the costs updated. Now, another thing that we do in Calculator, we have flagging. Now, this could be in an integration, or it can be a utility that runs. Okay, so flagging is always very important, particularly in an integrated environment, because you don't want your schedulers just to have all sorts of stuff coming into their system and they don't have an easy way to see that something new has occurred. So we've got some added bonuses here to let you know that, hey, these are new labor resources that came in. They were not part of the original plan. And we're also able to flag whether we're over on hours as well as costs. Okay, so it's just taking these values and giving a little bit of extra flagging, which is very, very helpful and makes the usability of P6 even better. Now, once again, we've got these rolling up automatically. Okay. Now, I do see here that my at completion labor is not in my columns. I think I'm missing it. Okay. So my PM EAC labor hours is missing. So I just want to, oh, darn. Okay, that's not going to work. Sorry, it's just that screen problem. Hey, Dan, what's that hotkey to? It's off the screen, but it's way too big and I can't move it. Remember the hotkey you guys told me?
Yes. Windows Shift left or
Windows
right,
Shift.
depending on which monitor it's on.
Oh, no, I need to make it smaller as well. It is something about Windows Shift.
If you hold down the Alt key and drag on the window, it might move it.
Shoot, sorry guys, it's my resolution doing this crazy thing. Okay, let me get out of this. Oh, I can't get out of it. Help.
You can hit I believe it's hold on a second, Nicole.
Yeah.
It's control space.
Control space. Yep.
And then I believe it's, I don't remember the shortcut offhand. I'm sorry. It's going to be move or.
Yeah. It's James who got this. Oh, maybe this will work. Okay, good. Okay, I was able to grab it. Perfect. Sorry, guys. A little funky thing that happens sometimes on the screen. Let me get out of there. Let me try that again. Okay, should be able to do it properly now. No, still same problem. Okay, let's not worry about it. I won't show you what I'm doing. I'm just going to copy something off this screen so I can get this. PM EAC units. Labor hours. Okay, I'm just going to copy it. Here you can actually see it. Just going to get this. Okay, so it looks like this field is not up on my activity layout. So I want to just go and add that in to my activity layout so that I can work with it on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to go and try and find this, Control F. Okay, so it doesn't actually look like it exists at the activity level. So I can create that. And as I mentioned, it's the same problem. Sorry, guys. So let me just try one more time and okay, there we go. So it looks like that is not actually a field in my database. Okay. So I can add it to the database. So it's a user field and I can add that to the database. So I'm going to create it. And as long as it's the same name, it's going to automatically do the rollup. Okay. I'm just adding it to the database. I just can't show it to you right now because this thing is the same problem. It's the screen size. And what was that? Control Shift. There we go. So I just added it to the database. Oops. Okay, just gonna have to do this. Okay, there we go. Sorry, it's just the resolution being funky. So as soon as I add it to the database, I can go add it to my columns. and I can get it on the screen, and I'll put it just beside, more or less beside the activity, so you can see it. So you see how it's empty? So now if I rerun the calculator, in fact, I think this actually runs automatically, so I don't truly have to do this, but I'll go ahead and do it. You can see that it's going to do the calculations and do all these roll-ups and get the values up. So this is how simple it is to add a roll-up to your system, and get it onto your layouts so that you can use it. And then of course you can get it up at the project level, and you can put it into Power BI reports, etc. Okay, so that's a big thing. That saves a lot of time. Now, while it's doing that, so I'll come back to that in a sec, let's take a look at updating expenses. Okay, so this one is a much more complicated example. So let me just give you some lay of the land. So this was the example where we were buying some things for this activity in Canadian, we were buying some things in American, we were also having different cost codes, which means we have different exchange rates, different handling, different freight, different brokerage. So this one was quite complicated. So same thing in this scenario, we did a simple way for the project manager to do the updating, okay? Now in this example, I've already done kind of a crazy update. It's way bigger than the budget, but just as an example so you could see it. And by doing that, it's going to do the estimate at completion. We could also update with an estimate to complete, so you can do it either way. The computer will keep track of what the last update was that the PM did. Okay, so this is super handy. And again, we can put it out to reports. We can put it out to web apps. We could put it out to our CAPS tool, which is an updating interface. So lots of different ways we can get this to be a simple updating mechanism. Now, because this is the main activity or main expense on the activity, as soon as I do this forecasting, it's going to start to do the automatic forecasting of all these other components. So again, it saves a lot of time for your team. So really, these are the things that we've done to try and make the costing much easier to work with inside of P6. Okay, so I'm starting to run out of time. I've given you some ideas of some scenarios we've done. We've done many others, but this gives you some ideas on the kinds of things that you can do with P6-Calculator. And we have snapshotting with our reporter tool, which lets you take a snapshot. So if some of you may do baselines, every time you do an update, you do baselines. Now with the snapshotting, you can start to push the data out to different costing graphics that you want to do and share it with the team. So in this case, a lot of the team won't be in P6. So we've got this data actually going out to Power BI. Now, the snapshots let us have different periods. So in this example, you can see I've done different snapshots, mostly monthly it looks like. And the data can be changing. And you can see it here. And we can filter on the different types of cost categories. So labor, materials, etc. So this lets you start to do filtering, and the graphs will change automatically. So this is really handy for a non-P6 user. And we've got different graphs by cost accounts. Okay, so another layer of reporting that if you're not using costing, you're not able to take advantage of. So this is the real key here, right? We're trying to get the data so it's usable by the team. And we've got the different breakdowns. And this sort of graph is super handy because then we can see where we've got real problems, okay? So this gives you an idea of where the variances are and where we're having overruns. And again, these interact. So this is all Power BI stuff in this example, but it's being fed by the work that we did with Calculator in P6 and being fed by snapshotting into P6 Reporter so that we can do all sorts of different great graphics out in our corporate tool. Okay, so if your corporate tool is Tableau or SAP reporting, it doesn't matter. The idea is the same. This is just giving you some different examples of the different kinds of reports that you can do once you've got the costing coming into P6. Okay, great. So let's just see if there are any questions that I might have missed because I was doing the presentation. Right now I don't see any questions. So hopefully that means you were able to follow along or at least get some ideas and the benefits of this sort of thing. So the key thing really is the effort. So it's a lot less effort to do all sorts of manipulations, different percentage calculations, all this heavy lifting that I was doing with multi-currencies, different rates, different overrides. P6-Calculator can help you do all that. And then you get that data out into a consumable fashion. So really that's the benefit. It's a lot less effort, it's much more efficient and more consistent in how you're producing information. Now it lets you also be consistent on reporting and cross-validations of different resources on different projects. So that's another big win for using this sort of thing. Now the key thing is, of course, the visibility and the reporting. So you're trying to drive more updating. More updating brings better visibility, faster decision making, more accurate decision making. That's really the key. And if you're more accurate, then hopefully you're going to be able to avoid any road bumps and problems in your project. That's really what we're trying to do. So we've got this being used in the electrical utility space, in the manufacturing space, various contractors around the world, and drilling companies are some of the ones that I've worked with. So we've got it being used in many different spaces. So it's definitely something that you can explore if you found some gaps, not only in costing, but maybe in the way you're doing resourcing, because they very heavily go together. Okay, great. So hopefully you saw something that was worthwhile spending the last hour and a bit together. This is one of many tools that we have. We've got, as I mentioned, P6 Reporter. I showed you P6 Loader very, very quickly. We've got our P6 QA tool, which lets you critique your schedules very quickly without having to go outside of P6. So it's all done inside P6. We've got updating tools. As I mentioned, our CAPS tool would be one that you could have some of this PM forecasting in. The other one we have is our barcode scanner one, TAPS. So these are super tools that could help your efficiency with P6. So take a look at our webinar schedule. I think Donna shared the link, and keep in contact. If there are no questions today, that's fine. If you have any, we'll stay on for another minute. And if they come up later or you want to explore it a bit more, reach out to myself or reach out to Donna, and we can help you explore whether this tool or some of the other tools could be a good fit for your team. And the other option is just to let us know here through this little poll if you would like us to reach out. If there's something you want to discuss further, that's fantastic. And that way we can follow up with you appropriately. Make sure we're using your time efficiently. Okay, I'll stop the